In this chapter, we will cover different areas of the lymphatic system and its two major functions. First off, the lymphatic system is part of the circulatory system, and it is also a vital part of the immune system. It has two major functions. It collects and returns interstitial fluid back to the bloodstream. It also houses and maintains major portions of the immune system. Now let's go over what the lymphatic system is made up of. It's made up of lymphatic vessels, lymph, lymphocytes, and lymphoid organs and tissue. Let's take a look at the different distributions and structures. First, lymph capillaries is found in most areas of your body except like bones, teeth, and bone marrow. These lymph capillaries are lymphatic one-way vessels that contain flap-like mini valves made of endothelial cells that let fluid in but not out. There are also lacteals that are special lymph capillaries located in the villi of the small intestines. These lacteals absorb fatty lymph that is then given a milky appearance called chyli. After flowing along the lymph capillaries, the lymph flows through a larger vessel known as collecting vessels. The collecting vessels have the same three tunics as veins, but have thinner walls, more internal valves, and more connections. Most of these vessels follow the pathway of veins. Some vessels travel along with the superficial vein, and deep lymphatic vessels travel with the deep arteries. The largest collecting vessels unite to form lymphatic trunks. These major trunks that drain lymph from large areas of the body are called lumbar, bronchomediastinal, subclavian, and jugular in the single intestinal trunk. The lymph will then flow from the trunk to one of the two ducts. Once the lymph is in the two lymphatic ducts, it drains and empties into their corresponding sides. The right lymphatic duct drains the right upper part of the body, that is, the right arm, the right thoracic region, and the right side of the head. It then empties into the blood vessels between your right intrajugular vein and right subclavian vein. The thoracic duct, known as the left duct, is the biggest out of the two ducts. The thoracic duct begins as an enlarged sac called the cisterna chyli, located between the last thoracic and second lumbar vertebrae. It collects lymph from the two large lumbar trunks that drain the lower limbs and from the interstitial trunk that drains the digestive organs. It also drains from the left side of the thorax, left upper limb, and the left side of the head. The duct then empties out the left intrajugular vein and left subclavian vein. Because the lymphatic system lacks an organ to pump lymph towards the heart, it contains a muscular pump which is made up of smooth muscle around the walls that squeeze the lymph vessel. As a respiratory pump, breathing pressurizes the diaphragm. Also, physical or passive movement increases the lymph flow. A clinical problem seen when lymph transport is interrupted is when there is swelling caused by tumors blocking the lymphatics or the lymphatics have been removed during cancer surgery. The lymphoid cells consist of the immune cells found in the lymphoid tissues together with the supporting cells that form the frame of those tissues. The lymphocytes are the main warriors of the immune system that protect the body against antigens. They are produced in the red bone marrow and then mature into T cells, B cells, or natural killer cells. T cells manage the immune response, and some directly attack and destroy infected cells. Regulatory T cells control the immune response. Helper T cells are very important. They also supply the stimulus for immune response. There are also suppressor T cells that slow down the immune system, and the cytotoxic T cells that target and destroy cancerous or infected cells. The other lymphocytes, B cells, protect the body by turning into plasma cells that produce antibodies. It is part of the humoral immunity and can attack bacteria without cells. Natural killer cells also attack cancerous or virus-infected cells. They're called natural killer cells because they don't need help from the helper T cells. Dendritic cells are a very special kind of spiny-looking macrophages found in lymphoid tissue. They phagocytize a foreign substance and by helping T cells activate. They also capture antigens and bring them back to the lymph nodes. Lastly, the reticular cells are fibroblasts, like cells that produce the reticular fibrostrum, which is the network that supports the other cells types in the lymphoid organs.
Immune response. Cellular immunity is caused by direct contact with same type T cells. It eliminates intracellular microbes that survive phagocytes or other infected cells. Humoral immunity is caused by production of antibodies. It eliminates extracellular microbes and their toxins. Cellular immunity has cellular targets such as cancer cells, virus-infected or parasite-infected tissue, killing the cells indirectly by releasing chemicals that enhance inflammatory response or activate lymphocytes or macrophages. Humoral has antibodies circulating freely through the blood and lymph where they home to bacteria and activating them for a short period of time and making them destruction by phagocytes or complement. Lymphoid tissue. Lymphoid tissue houses lymphocytes and provides immune surveillance. It has a structure of reticular connective tissue. Different types of lymphoid tissue are diffuse lymphatic tissue, lymphatic follicles, also known as nodules, tonsils, mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, also known as gut-associated lymphatic tissue. Diffuse lymphatic tissue. Diffuse lymphatic tissue is patches of lymphoid tissue scattered in the body. Lymphatic follicles are tightly packed lymphoid cells and reticular fibers. Lymphatic follicles form part of lymph nodes, appendix, and Peyer's patches. Tonsils are rings of lymphoid tissue around the throat. Different locations of the tonsil is pharyngeal, palatine, lingual, and tubular tonsils, which is rings around the ears. Tonsils' function is to remove pathogens from air, food, and keep immune system busy. Mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue and gut-associated lymphatic tissue both trap pathogens. Their locations are the Peyer's patch, appendix, and bronchi. In the Peyer's patch, there are spots of lymphatic tissue in the small intestine. In the appendix, which is out of the large intestine, and the bronchi is the passageway to the lungs. The structure of the mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue is just like the tonsils but without cups.
Lymphoid organs include the thymus gland, spleen, and lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are spots that help activate the immune system by filtering lymph and removing the bacteria and debris from the lymph vessels. These lymph nodes are located along the lymph vessels in which they cluster and most notably are seen in the inguinal, axillary, and cervical areas. Lymph nodes are contained within a capsule-like structure that's divided into sections by trabeculae. The stroma is made up of a framework of reticular fibers that separate the capsule into section-like baggies that contain T cells. The cortex makes up the outer layer and is divided into an outer cortex that contains germinal centers which house B cells and plasma cells, and an inner cortex that houses T cells. The medulla makes up the middle of the lymph node and has pathways of the same tissue that make up the cortex, B cells and T cells, called medullary cords. Then there's the lymph sinuses or lymph capillaries, which are open areas in the lymph node where macrophages live. Lymph from the capillaries enter through the afferent lymphatic vessels and exit through the efferent lymphatic vessel located at the hilum. The thymus gland is located below the sternum, medial to the lungs, and superior to the heart. It is the maturation site for T cells, which is most prominent during childhood. And in this histology slide, you can see that the thymus gland is divided into two sections, the cortex and the medulla, which is made up of hansel corpus or thymocorpus. The spleen is one of the largest lymphoid organs in the body. Located left, right below the diaphragm, its functions include producing thymosin, a site for lymphatic proliferation, cleaning out the blood, storing iron for making hemoglobin, storing platelets, and it also acts as a blood reservoir for when a person is getting ill. The spleen has a hilum which the artery enters and the vein leaves. Then, when looking at the histology of the spleen, you have white pulp, which is the purple colored stuff, that contains lymphocytes or white blood cells around blood vessels. And then there's the red pulp, which is comprised of red blood cells that are recycled and being cleared up. One of the clinical problems that affects lymph nodes is bulbous, which is when the lymph nodes becomes infected and swollen, as seen in the bubonic plague. Another is second-degree site of cancer from meningitis, in which a tumor breaks apart and it gets stuck in the lymph nodes. And then another clinical aspect is a splenectomy, in which you have to remove the spleen.